Welcome to the Matt Waller Podcast, where we look at success at the intersection of technology, logistics, supply chain, retail, and CPG, also known as the retail value chain. I want to clarify that this podcast is distinct from my responsibilities as a professor in the Sam M. Walton College of Business. Nonetheless, it aligns with my aspiration to provide practical insights to professionals and business by showcasing companies and people that can enhance your ability to manage, lead, and strategize and market effectively in the retail value chain. Before we dive into today's exciting episode, I'd like to thank our sponsor, New Road Capital Partners. New Road invests in proven technologies, services, and products that serve unmet needs in the marketplace. They look for companies in supply chain and logistics, as well as consumer-oriented companies. For more information, go to newroadcp.com. I would also like to disclose that I am a strategic advisor to New Road. I'd also like to recognize podcastvideos.com for the services they provide for these podcasts. I'm very pleased with their services. And now, without further ado, let's get into the exciting episode. I have with me today Charlotte Bax, who is the founder and CEO of Captur, which is a AI-driven quality control solution for supply chains. And I think you're going to really like this discussion. If you're in supply chain management, merchandising, retailing, CPG, supply chain, if you're an investor, I think you'll be interested in this. This company that Charlotte founded was started in a Google accelerator 4 years ago. And today, Captur already serves Fortune 100 company supply chains across Europe, US, and APAC. Charlotte is an expert in applying AI to help supply chains deliver better customer experiences, as you will hear. But unlike typical AI founders, her technical knowledge is largely self-taught. She started her career in product operations at Gap Inc. She holds an MBA from the London Business School and has been building AI products for the past 8 years. Personally, she is passionate about making AI accessible and partnered on programs with NASA and Google to promote women in STEM. This particular episode today, again, it's looking at the quality challenge of modern supply chains and how AI can address them. But we dive into the critical topic of quality for modern supply chains, exploring challenges that retailers face in maintaining service standards across multiple distribution channels, from online delivery to scheduled and in-store pickup. We also examine the multifaceted problem of trust that emerges in this landscape, including customer-retailer trust, fraud prevention, and internal workforce trust. Charlotte, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Matt. Really excited to chat today.
Charlotte, I'm really excited about this podcast, and I'd like to ask you, what are some of the big challenges that the supply chain faces, especially in terms of quality?
Yeah, I think it's such an interesting topic, and quality in the supply chain is not new, but I think it's one that we've all probably had acute experience with as customers, right? Think about, when you order something online, right, or you schedule a delivery, you expect it to be, fulfilled on time at your house in the right state. And if you've ever experienced as a customer something going wrong in that process, right, getting your order and it's the wrong thing, or it's damaged, or it comes late, from a customer's point of view, how important quality is in the supply chain, because customers are really demanding to say, I might be patient once, but I'm not going to be patient twice if kind of issues keep happening. But for the supply chains, I think what's interesting is why it's becoming harder and harder to manage quality is, especially in the last 5 years with COVID, we've seen lots of retailers focusing on trying to kind of meet the customer where they are, right? So offering new modes of distribution. right? So shop online, pick up in store, schedule delivery, on-demand delivery. And that's creating all of these new challenges, which I think about in kind of three buckets. One is the operational challenge of just how do you distribute to these new channels and meet the customer where they are. Second is experience challenges on how do you drive retention? How do you make sure that things go right every time? And then the last one is really the scale challenge on how do you do this profitably? How do you build an automation? So there are those three challenges: operational, experience, and scale, which every supply chain face today, but they face acutely because of these new types of modes, I think, of distribution.
Yeah, mentioning omnichannel, especially for brick and mortar types of stores, it seems like, one sort of tenet of quality management is that when you introduce complexity, quality problems increase. And so before you had a retailer that all of a sudden, eventually was selling online, maybe on their .com, but omni-channel really complicates that because all of a sudden you're selling online, but you're also there's buy online, pick up at store, buy online, deliver to home, buy online, deliver in home, drone delivery. There's all these different options, and much of it for traditional brick and mortar retailers is being done through brick and mortar stores, which is making store operations more complicated as well. So, and I know even at the merchandising level, most of these brick and mortar retailers that have gone omni-channel, their merchants focused more on, they'd have merchants focused on the brick and mortar, and then merchants focused on e-commerce. And over the years, they've started bringing them together. But again, it's causing lots of challenges. So you mentioned a lot of these challenges. So my question is, how can AI help to solve those types of challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're spot on. I mean, especially when you talk about omni-channel, I think omni-channel, that has really been the focus for the past 10 years. And even my time at Gap Inc., we were going through that transformation of taking the store merchandise team and the online team and bringing them together and thinking about unified assortment, unified distribution. I should just have one pool of inventory, right? But now everything's changing again and changing on these retailers, and don't just have the store and online. We've got all these micro hubs and micro sites, and how do we adopt a hub and spoke model to serve that? I think AI and the other hand too, you've got also rising theft and kind of fraud in the mix, right? And so where AI can really help, I think if we think about operational experience and scale, operations wise, you're seeing pretty early adoption of a ton of different technologies, like how do we distribute to remote places with drones, right? So AI can really help in kind of distribution. You're seeing people use AI for automated picking and sorting. You're seeing robotics at the actual distribution centers themselves, right? So I think there are physical operations challenges that are kind of earlier on the AI adoption curve, where you are seeing retailers and different companies test and actually do successful drone deliveries right at the moment. And then the scaling challenges. So where can you use AI to drive automation and better decision-making across the org? There's very interesting applications there of things like route optimization, right? Can you try and make a decision on where to route something the best using AI so that you can do that at scale and very rapidly and kind of replicate what it might take a team, 10 minutes to do in seconds. And there's also some interesting kind of workforce safety elements too. Think about when I'm scaling, my risk increases of safety, right? And my costs increase. And so I've seen some companies implement successfully computer vision to do kind of monitoring, right, of the work environment. And as we start scaling and it's harder for us to have oversight, are things safe? Are things running well? But then the last piece of it, the experience piece, is one that I think is earliest on in the adoption curve, which is kind of the most nascent when we talk about applying AI to improve customer experience. Most retailers today will be familiar with things like chatbot automation, right? And a kind of experience touch point with the customer. How do I meet the customer at every sort of communication channel? How do I fulfill distribution? But that piece of how do we improve the experience is an area where I'm really interested in. How can we use kind of real-time verification, real-time data to know that our operations are happening as we expect, right? Whether that be driving better data visibility, data capture, better kind of oversight, right, into process. So AI, at the bottom line, is already being adopted in all these places, right? And it generally just enables the company to scale efficiently, and the potential is that you no longer have that kind of accepted belief of as operations grow, complexity grows, issues grow. It's kind of what if you could scale and actually reduce, defects or missing orders in real time.
So, what are some of the challenges of adopting AI in supply chain within large enterprises?
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts too, and where you think we are on speaking to retail execs in terms of AI adoption. A few of the things that we hear as blockers, because people are buying AI, it's a new type of technology. They're kind of unsure about how to assess it. I think the three things that I hear consistently are kind of who owns it, right? This sits at the intersection of maybe the business team is driving the decision making, but they require heavy collaboration with the technical teams and the product teams. So one is just a challenge of ownership and cross-team collaboration. The second is, how do we know it's working? So we implement AI, right? How do we know when it's live in production, it's working and it's not hallucinating, right? Or it's not making the wrong decision. So what are the checks in place? And then the third thing is quite an interesting, it's a growing trend I'm seeing of what are the legal implications? What are the data implications? AI requires the capturing of a lot of data to work. And I see business teams unsure about data security, data privacy ramifications. So it's a classic, like, who owns it? How do we measure it? And what's the risk?
Yeah. And I think too, with AI, a lot of companies are concerned, especially with employees using publicly available AI because of its potential of leaking IP, essentially, and trade secrets and things like that. So, so a lot of these companies, I think, are starting to build their own systems. They may be using something that's already out there, an open source tool, but they're building their own systems and then optimizing on their data as well. Because a lot of these companies, depends, but a lot of companies in supply chain, retail, CPG, et cetera, they've got a lot of data. They've actually got a huge amount of information to train large language models on. And but from what I've seen, everyone is still very much in we're on the very beginning of the curve on how to learn this. The initial adoption has been incredibly high, but the application from a practical perspective has been a little slow, from what I can tell. Now, some companies are faster than others for sure. And I think many companies have been using certain types of AI, like neural networks and things like that, for a long time. But this is different, and it really is different in so many ways. And And so I think there's still a lot of experimentation going on. But I'd like to know, what are you personally excited about in terms of AI?
Well, a couple trends. I mean, you and I were chatting about personally how we're using Gen AI in our day-to-day work, research, right? And so I think first OpenAI and now plethora of other tools from Microsoft, Google have just made AI so accessible. And we've seen it, after ChatGPT, you had this big wave, and suddenly, 2024, 2025, implementing an AI strategy is now top of the board deck for most companies. And I think that's so exciting because people obviously see the potential. And even if they're using it in their own personal day-to-day work or projects, it's just really sped up the awareness of AI. But like you said, it's not, AI has been around for 20 years in applications, but it's just this type of kind of accessible AI, general AI. So I'm excited about mindsets opening and shifting and people being open. In terms of the actual technologies, I'm really excited about two things. One, our phones are so good now, right? And mobile devices are so good. Hardware from people like NVIDIA and Qualcomm has really sped up. And so now you can do a lot of AI on what they call edge. So actually doing the compute on the device. That enables you to tackle challenges like we see at Capturr, where the AI needs to happen in real time in the moment. And you might have constraints like offline, low signal. So the ability to use these new kind of advances in mobile and do edge compute in very real applications is very exciting. And then also when you talk about companies adopting AI, especially if they've got their own data set to play with or to start with, there's some really interesting realms in synthetic data, which allow, and I'm sure people personally might have played around with kind of text to image generators, Dolly, right? You type in, I want a picture of a cat with a birthday hat on. And they're pretty bad, and they're bad in funny ways now, but you can see how they get better and better. But I've seen some recent advancements from Meta, which are quite astonishing, where you can type in text and get a 3D output. So if you think about processes in retail like products online, giving people a 3D experience of what a product looks like, maybe you can start to generate that and create that. Merchandiser could do that. They don't need to be a specialist graphic designer. Things don't need to take months. So I'm excited about those ways that people are thinking about AI and how we can rapidly prototype.
I use a AI tool called Poe, P-O-E. It gives me access to hundreds of applications in AI. I love it. I have it on my phone, I have it on my computer. I'm currently building a house, and I started thinking about, and you'll see how this applies to merchandising in a moment, but I started thinking about our outdoor cooking area, our patio. And I know I'm going to have a gas grill. I also know I'm going to have a big green egg.
Love it.
And so if I'm going to have a big green egg, then I'm going to need lump charcoal. I also want a trash can out there. There's a few things I want. I also want a staging area for my firewood for my house. Not permanent, but a staging area. And all in this brick enclosure. So I entered into Claude Sonnet 3.5, the dimensions of everything I'm going to buy, how much space I have for this brick structure, et cetera, right?
Yeah.
I said, given all of this, come up with a description of how I could lay all this out.
Brilliant.
And it came up with one, and there was something I didn't like about it. I said, well, I don't like this, and it changed it. And again, this was not visual. This was just a description, but detailed. It took into account the dimensions of everything. And then I said, okay, now rewrite this so that I can take the text and put it into an image generator to generate an image of what this would look like. So it did. I took that text, I put it in an image generator.
Mm-hmm.
One nice thing about Poe is if you do that, it'll generate an image for, using the tool you pick. But then at the bottom, it'll say, would you like to try one of these other image generators?
Oh, great.
So I kept clicking them until I found the one I liked. I probably went through 15. And then I did the final version looked like a photograph of exactly what we want. So I was able to print that out and give it to my builder and say, here's what I'm looking for. And my point of this is that in going through that process, I realized that a retailer, an e-tailer, an e-commerce company could easily provide this kind of text in advance, or even use, an image generator. In other words, you click the items you want, you say, here's how much space I have or whatever, and it could generate, options for you. That's for the consumer. But then for the merchandising, right now planograms are still very archaic from the one I've seen. It seems like there's a great application here using that same kind of logic, right? Where you put the dimensions in, you say the case pack has this much, we've got to have at least this many this much capacity, given the size of the case pack, on and on and on. You would think that you could come up with an AI tool to optimize that.
Absolutely. To try and do, that's what AI is great at. It's great at taking multiple types of input, whether it be numbers, text, images, combining it together and giving you a starting place. And yes, you're going to have an expert come in and shift things, but how empowering for you to say, actually, I don't need to start with hiring a really expensive architect or an interior designer. I think I can at least get off the starting blocks myself, and that makes me a more informed consumer, and that makes me more likely to purchase, probably, because you don't feel like, I don't know where to start. I've got this kind of image in my head. I don't know if it's going to work.
That's right.
Right? So it probably drives, higher conversion if you can empower your customer to have more knowledge.
I would think so. Now, back up the supply chain, or even before that stage, Charlotte, well, you're the founder and CEO of Captur, and tell us a little bit about what Captur does.
Yeah, so Capturr, we're really at this intersection of quality and supply chain. So the origin of the company is really a combination of my background in retail with the Gap Inc., my experience on some of these supply chain challenges, and also experience in AI and how you can apply it. What we're trying to help our customers and retailers solve is, how can they scale operations while maintaining quality? And how can they actually make quality their USP? And get rid of this accepted truth in operations of, as you scale and add complexity, customer experience suffers, right? You always plan to see kind of an increase in support tickets, right, with growth in the business, and that doesn't have to happen. And so how we actually do that, and what Capturr is, it's a quality control platform, automation platform. And we take all these processes that retailers do today, would it be like education of the frontline workforce, building policies, figure out, what's my internal policy for returns? What's my internal policy for deliveries? And those are written in PDF docs, right? And they can be pretty stagnant. So we take those policies, we ingest them, we understand them, we turn them into machine learning models, and we apply the policy in real time through photos that are taken on the spot by customers or workforce. So if you take a photo of a delivery in front of a door, what Capturr is going to be doing is automatically checking, well, is it delivered to the right place? hitting the guidelines from what the company specified where the customer wants it is at the right address. But it's doing all that in real time. And then as the output, the company can be really confident that they're going to scale while managing quality. They've got a full audit history of what's going on. But at the end of the day, it's all about helping companies drive growth, drive retention, because they're improving quality, the supply chain. And this is part of why I'm really excited about these like mobile and what we can do with edge compute, because real-time verification, real-time AI simply just wasn't possible beforehand. Right. And that's why retailers have been trying to solve this in various different ways forever. I mean, what was your experience? How do you think quality and this kind of quality oversight has changed in the past 20 years? Has it changed at all, really? We're still doing things the same way.
Well, it's interesting. When I first got involved in quality, it was back in the 80s. And, it was a hot topic because back then, quality, everyone started realizing, because by 1980, I'd say 1980, most people thought of Japanese products like Toyota cars as being lower quality. By 1985, everyone realized, we were wrong about that.
Yeah.
They may have been low on features and premium, but in terms of reliability, durability, et cetera, they were way ahead of everybody.
Yeah.
And so there was a big push because everyone thought Japan was going to take over the world and become the world's manufacturer. And so everyone in the especially in the U.S., there was this huge push to implement things like statistical quality control, quality management, later Kaizen. Lean was much later, and Six Sigma.
Yeah.
But they're all very similar in many ways. I think that retailers started implementing it a lot in the early 90s, certain retailers. I think companies have taken their eye off of it in some ways. They've been a little more focused on things like product management, which is very important.
Yeah.
It is. And I actually think AI can help with product management in a lot of ways. But I can see AI helping in especially large language models in areas, not necessarily statistical process control. I think there's easy ways to deal with that. But in terms of, because a big part of quality management has to do with generating, for example, I'll give you one tool just as an example, I think of it. You look at like a fishbone diagram, right, where you start with a problem and then you try to say, why did that occur? And then why did that occur? And you go back at least 5 whys, well, large language models should be able to generate that automatically.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's things. And so if you're looking at some error in the supply chain, it doesn't really matter where it is, and you apply a tool like a fishbone diagram and you go back 5 levels, well, large language models should be able to do that very easily. Yeah. So I'm thinking that at this point, there's lots of opportunities in that way. But also, to your point earlier, I think marrying computer vision with AI is a huge opportunity in the supply chain, all areas of the supply chain. Yeah. So,
absolutely. It's probably true what you said too on equality maybe hasn't been the emphasis in the past 10 years, because actually people were just they were just really focused on getting to parity with speed of delivery, right? It's the push for the same day, right? And speed is one very important element of the overall experience, right? How convenient is this purchase? Okay? But with that traditional kind of even Japanese manufacturing systems, and in manufacturing, you've got the concept of quality management systems that have existed for a long time, and they're very important tenets of especially highly regulated industries or manufacturing industries, right? So why don't retailers and why don't new on-demand platforms have quality management systems, right? What is the new system? And it's going to be a combination of things. Like you said, there's something you can do with LLMs helping to prompt the people, help people work through decision making, the fishbone diagram. And then computer vision can be used as this tool, which really gives you eyes on the ground, right? And virtually, can you know what's going on with every delivery, and can you validate the right things happening? So I think we'll definitely see a shift. And this is how retailers want to differentiate, right? They want to differentiate by experience. If everyone is almost on parity with speed, how are you going to drive retention? Really, it's going to be about delivering the customer a different experience or a consistent experience.
So, Charlotte, what advice do you have to companies that are considering the decision of build versus buy in-house when it comes to AI solutions?
Yeah, it's such a hot topic. Everyone's really trying to define this internally. So on one hand, you've got the kind of existing product tenant, which is you build internally for strategy, kind of is a strategic, or you buy for parity, right? So are you trying to kind of match the market in shifts in demand and maintain feature parity, or are you trying to strategically internally make a big bet about your product, right? So that's, I think, more from the product and technical teams what an existing tenant that they would look at. So, for example, a company might choose to work with a kind of customer support AI bot because they know, they need to provide a customer support tool, a CRM, but it may not be the thing for a retailer. It may not be the thing that they want to strategically differentiate with, right? They need to provide a level of service, but they're not a customer support platform internally, right? So that's one way to think about it. I really encourage, and I'm seeing more and more of this, which is great. I encourage companies to prototype and play around with what you can do with large vision models, large language models. But there's such a large gap between productizing AI and really having it in production because it involves all of this extra bits around how are you going to monitor, maintain it, continually update models, how are you going to build machine learning teams and infrastructure around this. And we've even had companies come back to us, right, who have tried to build their own models and just said it's way too hard from a process and managing perspective. Like prototype so that you can kind of understand what you want, just like you did with your furniture, right, in your backyard. Prototype, but then if you want to truly see the benefit of AI, launch it in production and have a really scalable AI system, that's where partnering can be your best bet. Because really, teams, if they underestimate the kind of the resource that goes into building all the scaffolding that you need for not just building, but continually monitoring and maintaining AI systems, that can be a rude awakening, right? 6 months, 12 months down the line in investment. So partners are the best there, where you're not just buying off the shelf, right? You have a ability to co-collaborate. You have ability to know, collaborate on roadmap and that sort of thing. But those are the type of things that I'd suggest leaders think about. But I guess the last element with AI is to think about is how to define your problem. So AI problems can be they can demand really, really high accuracy. So it's kind of, what's the risk if this goes wrong? So if a chatbot gives the wrong article recommendation to a customer, it's not that big a deal. It's not ideal, but it's not that big a deal, versus applications of AI where you're needing to reroute large shipments, or you're doing medical diagnosis, right? There you think about the accuracy has to be 99.9%, right? Because the cost of failure is so high. And so that's another critical thing for business leaders to think about. Like, where is our problem on the kind of risk of failure scale? Because the higher the risk, the more control you're going to want to have over things internally, right? And then, what type of problem is this? Is this a image problem? Is this a language problem? Is this a combination problem? So hopefully that starts to frame it, but it's a different type of purchase from things we've seen in the past, for sure.
What are some of your thoughts around how this is changing consumer behavior?
So I'll be really interested to see how this is changing how the next generation shops, right? If you think about high school students today, they've already adopted GPT to help with homework prompts, right? I bet they're researching using LLMs instead of using Google. So they're already learning these behaviors, just like the generation before learned how to use iPhone, right? They're learning this behavior of prompt writing, whether they know that consciously or not. And so there are going to be so many interesting things, even how consumers are going to want to navigate retail websites, right? Retail websites are built on a very hierarchical, structured approach, right? I go to the category, I select the thing. Whereas the next generation are used to freeform text. I'm looking for a red shirt that's great for summer and can be worn with jeans, right? So we haven't even started to see really the full impact of that consumer shift. But I think as the current generation, the kind of teenagers now, as they gain more purchasing power, right, you'll start to see a bigger demand on retail to actually change the shopping experience. The past 5-10 years have all been about, as we talked about, consumer demands for speed, convenience, right? So probably the next wave is going to be all about ease of experience. So who knows what websites will look like in 10 years' time, but I bet they'll look quite different.
Well, Charlotte, thank you so much for taking time to join us today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Matt. Yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation.
If you're finding value in this podcast, we greatly appreciate your support by subscribing to our YouTube channel. Additionally, following us on Apple and Spotify and leaving up to a 5-star review would be immensely helpful. We welcome any feedback or questions related to the podcast, as well as suggestions for further topics and guests. You can leave your comments on our YouTube channel, and rest assured that I will read each and every one of them. Please also take a moment to check out our podcast sponsors, as they play a critical role in keeping this podcast running. For more information on specific topics, timestamps, or links to articles mentioned during the podcast, head over to mattwallerpodcast.com.